Thank you, Paul. Okay, back to the program. Our next speaker is Diana Miles, the Chief Executive Officer of the Law Society of Ontario. As you may already know, Ms. Miles has been instrumental in leading the Law Society's initiatives on public confidence, competence, and equity. Please join me in welcoming Diana Miles.
Hi there. Put that clicker in.
Let's get your...
One sec, I'm just going to get my equipment here.
See if that works. Forward and backwards. Yep.
Okay. Excellent. All right. Good afternoon, and thank you for having me again. I really enjoy chatting with you and giving you updates on the Law Society. I'm going to do something fairly quick today. I only have about 20 minutes. So if there are questions and we don't have time to take them, please store them up and feel free to send me a note or give me a call at any time. I'm happy to chat with any of you about what we're doing. So let's just take a quick overview of what we're going to do today. I'm going to run through quite a bit, and here's the overview. Let's start with a snapshot of the professions, though, just as at December 2023. So these are the year-end numbers from last year. We're closing in, of course, on the end of this year. At the time, at the end of last year, we had over 70,000 licensees, and now as we close off 2024, I'm guessing it's probably going to be closer to 72,000. So we've had quite a few licensees added, but then of course we get some retirements and departures. We licensed 2,500 new lawyers last year and 900 new paralegals, and there are about 44,000 lawyers who are practicing law in Ontario right now, either in private firms or perhaps in-house or in government, etc. Some key operational stats. Let's talk about licensing because this is how we see our entries. In 2023, there were 2,814 newly registered lawyer licensing candidates in our protocol. On any given day at the Law Society, we have about 6,000 lawyers rolling through our licensing process because they have 3 years to complete all the different parts of it. 60% of our licensing candidates have a Canadian law degree, and 40% of them are from a law school outside of Canada. This chart compares the Canadian and the internationally educated lawyer licensing applicants from 2015 through to 2023. And you'll notice here over the past 10 years, we've pretty much seen a flat trajectory for Canadian law school candidates, but we've seen a noticeably increasing trajectory and trend for the international candidates that are coming into the province. The differential licensing process outcomes in comparison to Canadian candidates that you see on this slide may indicate that more rigor should be applied to the licensee assessment in the new world of mobile candidates in particular, where these candidates, of course, are coming to Canada without any prior exposure to any of our assessment protocols or our legal culture or our legal administration systems. We do need to balance fair access to the profession with protecting the public interest and ensuring those providing legal services demonstrate the required competencies. But you'll see in the chart that's ahead of you that once the candidates, whether they're coming from Canadian law schools or internationally trained locations, end up with relatively the same results through the exam process at the end. 95% of our Canadian candidates will make it through the process in the 3-year period. About 85% of the internationally trained will do the same. So we're on track to exceed the number of complaints received year over year at the Law Society, having just experienced an almost 12% increase in complaints in 2023. At the end of this year, I'm estimating, based on the trends my team have told me, that we're going to hit about 6,900 new complaints just in this year alone. In 2023, the increased emphasis was placed at the Law Society on the application of more robust risk analysis to our decisions involving the triage of complaints and case planning throughout our regulatory processes. So you'll see here that fewer cases were actually closed in complaints and compliance in 2023. Now, that's the very front end of our processes. That's because the matters that are coming in and that were screened were much higher risk. At that end, we screen only for jurisdiction and relevance and merit to our particular jurisdiction and our needs and requirements. that shows an increasing trend of complaints that have merit that we have to send through to further investigation and intake and resolution. So that is not a good sign. Measures have been introduced to ensure that risk is considered regularly and consistently across all of our divisions, and of course it's supported by documentation in our case management system. And we are exerting a continuing effort into providing necessary training across the organization to make sure that we have effective and consistent assessment of risk for every matter that comes into us, and a more proactive and effective resolution of lesser risk situations. So one thing that I wanted to mention to you today was that we saw a significant increase in motions for interlocutory suspensions in the last year or two, related to issues of most significant risk to the public or to the public interest. Our professional regulation division continued to emphasize early interventions in cases of significant risk. In 2023, several licensees were suspended on an interlocutory basis while the investigation was still ongoing on their matter, because the findings were that there was a significant risk to the public or public interest. I just wanted to review with you some of the circumstances that led to some of these injunctions so that you have them in the back of your minds, because frankly, some of them are a bit scary and they're getting far more sophisticated and far scarier by the day. So we've seen exploitative loan agreements in which senior citizens were induced to enter mortgages or security interests with onerous terms, and you will have read about this in the media, of course, typically without full disclosure, or where mortgages or higher mortgages were placed on their properties without their knowledge or consent, setting up really difficult situations where these mortgages were enforced unfairly against these elderly individuals. We've seen allegedly fraudulent transactions that resulted in substantial losses to multiple parties and the misleading of the client and the law society. Trust accounts are being used for transactions that are unrelated to the provision of legal services in alleged investment schemes where our tribunal panels have concluded that the use of the trust account exposed many people who deposited money to significant risk of loss. We've seen charges for criminal offenses related to child luring, and substantial shortages in the trust account for extended period of times, putting clients' funds in significant jeopardy. So these are becoming more and more commonplace every year. Just to continue on this theme, and I think really another name for this slide could be what keeps Diana up at night. You'll note that every one of these topics that you see on the screen here are related to bad actors, and of course our goal is to reduce harm and get rid of those bad actors. Despite this difficult set of circumstances, though, I did want to remind you that only a small number of our licensees receive complaints. So when you look at our licensees who are in private practice, so working in private firms, because they're the bulk of the complaints that we receive, 9.5% of lawyers in private practice receive at least one complaint, usually on an annual basis. That's remained relatively steady for the last 4 or 5 years. So it's just a small group of nefarious actors that cause all of the issues and all of the costs and implications. We've just received approval from Convocation for the 2025 budget, and that includes allocations for us to implement process changes and tools that we can use to address many of these issues more quickly. For instance, the budget does include an additional full-time employee headcount to address the sustained increase in volume and complexity of regulatory cases, particularly related to money handling, and to support the enhancements to implement a more integrated regulatory model to address greatest harms. So speaking of the budget, I'll also come in the fall to give you an update on that. Though economic conditions and inflation have stabilized, the cost of goods and fees for services continue to rise. The Law Society has managed to keep increases to third-party expenses negligible through a variety of efficiencies which we've added, such as digitizing our processes, getting new systems in place, and also continuing our hybrid working arrangements, both for our governance level and our operational functions as well. We've implemented our business and technology transformation project, which means that the capital investment phase of that project is complete, and it came in on time and on budget. And we're currently in the sustainment period of LSO Connects, which is budgeted now as a regular capital project. I mentioned earlier that with all of the increasing and complex issues that we're seeing come through the Law Society, that that lead to harms to clients, and in particular the loss of money due to the dishonesty of some lawyers and paralegals, there is a heightened pressure on, in particular, the lawyer compensation fund, and this trend is not dissipating. Already in 2024, there's been a 25% increase in compensation fund inquiries and heightened claims activities, which is not good, and it has a significant impact on our work at the Law Society, and of course, more at home, for all of us at home on all of our fees as licensees, which is probably a good segue to get into the budget and the outcomes here. For 2025, the annual fee for lawyers is going up slightly to $2,039. While there is a slight increase in the annual fee, it is actually still below the fee that was set back for 2020. Continued digitization, here's a breakdown for you so you can see it by category. Continued digitization, automation, and the use of virtual functionality to support operations is mitigating the impact of our fees while allowing the Law Society to move forward with implementing important things like the Family Legal Services Provider Credential and the Foundations of Sole Practice course. As I mentioned, a component of the increase in the lawyer license fee is driven by increased claims activity within the lawyer pool of the compensation fund, which puts pressure on this fund. And you'll see the breakdown there for the fund is going up again. We expect it's likely to go up next year as well based on what we're seeing this year by way of applications. I've also included the paralegal annual fees here for you if you're interested in taking a look at those. The 2025 budget includes funding for other affiliated or related organizations as well, as you know, who are supported by the Law Society on an annual basis, and their budgetary asks have increased year over year. We're making a continued investment in legal information and library services, of course, through our funding of LEARN, which you can see takes up the majority of the support to other organizations, which is with a slice of the pie that's a little over $11 million. CanLII will receive about $2 million, which is only a slight, very slight, less than $50,000 increase for the year. FOLA is receiving $250,000 to support their efforts and activities. And other organizations who continue to receive funding include the Federation of Law Societies of Canada, the Law Commission of Ontario, and Pro Bono Ontario. So I did just want to mention a few of the consultations that we have going right now at the Law Society. There's quite a few things out there, and I hope you'll be looking for them with your members and giving us some feedback and input. We have a consultation on increased transparency that's out there right now and is going to be open until the end of November, and that's coming from the Professional Regulation Committee. Those recommendations would require licensees to report additional personal and business information to the Law Society, and the Law Society may disclose some of that information if it's in the public interest to do so. So we're asking for input on that. We have a governance reform consultation that just came out and is open until January 31st of next year. It's proposing a set of foundational future changes for a new Law Society governance model, including changes to the size and the composition of convocation and electoral reform. The task force itself has found that the size of convocation, which as you may or may not know, has 54 voting members and other additional members that also participate. They found that the size of convocation hinders timely decision-making and progressive forward movement, among other findings. Most of the proposed reforms, if they're approved, would be in effect for the 2027 bencher election, because many of them are going to require legislative changes as we move forward with that. We also have a consultation that will be coming out shortly on trust account management and enforcement. It's a white paper to just invite consultation and input from anyone who's interested. This considers operational and policy changes to enhance the Law Society's oversight of trust account records. So again, this directly goes back to what I mentioned earlier about money mishandling issues being a big issue for the Law Society right now. It's proposing facilitation of early identification of account management issues and also improving the Law Society's ability to intervene effectively and in a more timely manner where the public interest requires. Our acronym for this, because we love acronyms at the Law Society, is TAME, because we do want to tame these issues. It's a significant project. The Law Society's strategic planning goal of increasing alignment between competence and conduct actions to ensure that we're addressing greatest harms to the public is exactly this issue. So this work is pivotal to achieving that goal. The initial white paper will be released later this month, and it's going to provide an overview of ongoing operational changes and policy changes that are upcoming. And then also additional policy changes will be the subject of further consultations, probably over the next 18 months to two and a half years. Finally, there's one other consultation matter that's coming forward, and that's on the Indigenous Cultural Competence course. That's upcoming through the Equity and Indigenous Affairs Committee, and we're going to be seeking feedback about a proposed Indigenous Cultural Training course in response to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's Call to Action 27. I'm just looking ahead to 2025 and some new requirements and initiatives. We have a few of these as well. So client contingency planning. Licensees in private practice are going to have to confirm that they have reviewed their contingency plan every year. New resources are now available on the Law Society's website and through the Law Society and are online, including suggested plan templates, lots of FAQs, lots of supports and information. So on March 31st of 2026, so 2026, not 2025, licensees will be required to confirm on their annual report filing that they have made appropriate client contingency arrangements. So you have quite a bit of time, but you have to be ready for this by the end of next year. Foundations of Sole Practice course, those of you, of your colleagues who are going to declare at any point in 2025 that they're a sole practitioner are going to have to report in their 2026 annual filing, which is, and so this is a little bit of a brain dance here, which is actually due in 2027, so lots of time here, that they have completed this course. Also, we have the Family Legal Services Provider Credential. The first cohort, this is for paralegals, to do some component of family law. The first cohort is actually full. The program begins in January 2025, and that class is expected to graduate in May of 2025. So it's just licensed paralegals who have applied for this additional credential who can take it. I did want to note to this group that Fanshawe College, who's our partner in developing this course, is looking for field placement hosts for the first cohort of the FLSP candidates. So if you or any of the members in your area may have an interest in learning more about that, if they could contact Fanshawe, that would be very helpful, both to obviously Fanshawe, but also to the public of Ontario who need more access to supports in this area. I wanted to just give a shout out for LSO Connects today and remind you to set up your accounts. LSO Connects is the Law Society's new service-oriented secure communications channel, which has replaced the Law Society portal. LSO Connects offers very convenient one-stop access to all Law Society services and information now. You'll use your LSO Connects to communicate all things with the Law Society. All of your interactions will be stored in one place so that the Law Society team members will be able to quickly assist you. You'll pay your fees, you'll record your CPD hours, you'll complete other administrative transactions, check your status, and you'll fulfill all of your regulatory obligations through LSO Connects now. The accounts that have to be set up are essential. You have to have an account to meet your regulatory obligations. Only you are authorized to make changes to your information on file with the Law Society through your LSO Connects account. With this move to LSO Connects, we've updated and streamlined certain services as well. So a key change is going to involve how you're going to pay your annual fees. We will no longer be sending out any invoices to you. You will pay your fees through your LSO Connects account, having been prompted by us through email and other communications to do so. Prior to making your fee payment, you're required to review and update and confirm your work-related information in LSO Connects. And it's really important to ensure that this work-related status information is correct, because the registry and what the public sees about your status as a practitioner depends on it. To avoid error in fee payments and status changes, licensees are being encouraged to pay their own fee directly through the Law Society Connects portal. This is efficient, and it does ensure a very quick and accurate record for your personal data, but more importantly, it ensures your privacy of your data and is your obligation to be personally responsible for that status. So please do set up your accounts, and please, if you could remind your members in your local areas to do the same. We noted this change to our portal back in April with all licensees, and we've been sending out notifications and reminders to everyone to sign up since July, and we'll be sending out more reminders leading up to the March 31st filing deadlines, but please don't leave it to the last minute of the deadline. To assist you, we also have a dedicated website page with facts and how-to resources, so we hope you'll avail yourself of this. Finally, because I know I only have a bit of time, and maybe there may be a question or two, I have two other slides here that I usually leave with you just to remind everyone of the various resources the Law Society has developed to support you and your members. I won't go through all of these. I'll just leave this for you and you can take a look at them. And then finally, please do stay connected to the Law Society. We'd love to hear from you, and if there's anything you need, there are multiple ways for you to get in touch with us. So I'll leave it at that because I wanted to ensure that maybe there was a minute to have a question, if there is a minute to have a question. I'll assume there is until someone shuts me down. Go ahead.
I have a question about one of your first slides that showed the
Sure.
number of licensing candidates.
Yes.
And it struck me that the number of paralegals who are licensed versus the number of paralegals who are practicing law, there's
Yes.
a really big gap.
It is, yeah.
Compared to lawyers. And I just was wondering if you had any comment on that
Sure.
or what
Yep.
some of the factors are that are driving such a
Yeah,
big
no, I'd be
gap.
happy to comment on that. It is a noticeable gap, the 11,000 to the 4,200 regularly practicing. I think what we're seeing as a trend in the paralegal profession is that a lot of people are taking the credentials, so they're going to the college programs, they're getting licensed by us, but then they're determining that they'd actually rather not practice. So a lot of these people are going on different employment trajectories. So while a lot of them might still be licensed, they may still have a license with us, they're paying it, and they would like to keep that license, they're not actively practicing in any way. So we have the same issue with lawyers. We have a number of lawyers, quite a few thousands of lawyers who are also not practicing. They're employed in another way. They're not touching law in any way. But it's much more obvious in the paralegal group because they're a smaller size, obviously. Yeah. Yes.
Well, thanks, Tim. So I'm Edward Kiernan from Norfolk Law Association. I read a lot of the Law Society Tribunal reports that come out on Canley, and something I've noticed in the last year or two is lawyers being disciplined because their payroll remittances to Revenue Canada or their HST remittances to Revenue Canada were late. So, for example, Revenue Canada there was one in the Cape Report in which Revenue Canada issued a collection notice against a lawyer's account because their HST was late. And the tribunal is saying, well, these funds are impressed with a trust, you get HST money on a bill, so if you're not remitting it, that brings the profession to disrepute. If you're late with your payroll remittance or your income tax, brings the profession to disrepute, so you're being disciplined by the Law Society for it. I think this is new because I've been reading reports for some time. Now, sometimes these lawyers are involved in other problems too, but it seems to me that, has Revenue Canada asked the Law Society to get involved in tax collection enforcement?
Yeah, so I can tell you that no, that CRA doesn't dictate what the Law Society does with its regulatory activities. I am not familiar with a significant increase in that area, but certainly if we have, and it goes back to what I mentioned earlier, we have a lot of lawyers who are now engaging in money mishandling activities and defalcations. It is likely, and I know it is tied to that. So it's a whole bundle. Not only are they removing funds for their trust accounts, they're not dealing with their own finances properly, they're not actually remitting their monies to the proper agencies, and then therefore bringing their activities into disrepute. But it's more indicative of someone who's not paying attention to their practice, and when they're not paying attention to their practice, they're also not paying attention to client deadlines and other issues. So it's about governance and a failure to govern oneself as well. So no one asked the Law Society. I think it's tied to the increase in money defalcations that we're seeing.
Thank you, Laura Oliver. I'm on the FOLA board. I'm just wondering if there are measures in place for serial complainers. So, for example, the Law Society undergoes an investigation, and this seems to be more prevalent in family law, but determines that the complaint doesn't have any merit, and then the individual just turns around and complains again.
Yeah, so third-party complaints and/or other complaints, or the frequent flyer complainants. Yeah. So, we obviously have a lot of individuals who are very angry these days. It is an angry world out there. So yes, I mean, I think I spoke earlier in my notes about the special focus we're putting on triaging and risk management. So we've upped the ticket on that that's one of the very reasons we're doing it, because we can't keep having frequent flyer complainants, and they are not easy to deal with. I have to tell you. I mean, I feel for my team every day. It is very hard to have these conversations with these people, but we do have those conversations. So even when they're frequent flyers, when they get in touch with us, we are obligated to respond to them. So we are actually triaging them. We do not put a lot of, countenance in what they're doing, repeat complainants. We look at every single thing, but if it's the same thing again, we're not going to address it. If we've already shut down one, there has to be new evidence, and we have to see proof of that. Yeah. Okay, so I think I better go because I'm running over. So thank you all very much for your time. I really appreciate being asked to be here.
Just before you leave.